Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here, those of you that will see this later. Today I want to appreciate a koan from the miscellaneous koans, which are the koans that we begin with in our training, also known as the sheet koans. And I'll read the koan and then I'll give a little context and then we can discuss it. Here is the koan. Joshu's unsheathed sword. Glittering severe frost is illuminating. Asking what it is, the body is cut in half. Joshu's unsheathed sword. Glittering severe frost is illuminating. Asking what it is, the body is cut in half. So, having been practicing Zen in the tradition of Maizumi Roshi for a long time, I've encountered several different versions of these sheet koans. And this particular version, which comes from Shishin Roshi, has 100 of them. The one that Daishin Roshi uses has about 140, but a lot of them are from the Mumonkan and the Hekigen Roku and things that we'll study later. And so there seems to be two schools of thought. One is there are certain koans that you encounter later that are worth encountering as a beginner as well, and repeating when you hit them as a more intermediate student. And then there's another school of thought, which is that you don't need to intersperse those. You just do the 100 sheet koans and move on. You don't become a Zen Roshi without being a little bit of a nerd. And so I got a bee in my bonnet recently, and I got in touch with Gyodo Sensei, who's a good friend of mine in Boulder, who is Shishin Roshi's Dharma heir. And Shishin Roshi is the one who I first did these koans with. And I said to Gyodo, can you send me the koan sheet that you're using now? So now we have it. And as I've been cross-referencing, what I've noticed is that between the one that Daishin uses and the one that Shishin uses, there's all of the extra koans that you encounter later in the Blue Cliff Record and the Mumonkan in Daishin's version. But other than that, they are almost identical.
You mean the wording?
The order of the koans and the koans themselves, it's just that there's been some inserted. However, there's about, I haven't done a correct count, but there's about 10 or so that are in Shishin's versions that are not in Daishin's versions at all. And this is one of them. Which means that I first did this koan about, I don't know. What year is it? 2023?
20, 25 years ago?
Yeah, 24 years ago, probably, in Boulder with Shishin. So because I moved from Shishin to Daishin at some point in my training and started doing Daishin's curriculum, I haven't encountered this koan in a long time because my students haven't done it until now. But going forward, what I want to do, and I guess I can now that I'm a Roshi, is I want to combine the two so that you don't miss any of them. Because why not? Why not do them all? So this is case 31 from the version that is used at Great Mountain Zen Center and Eon Zen Center in Colorado. And I think this is the version that's used at Great Mountain Zen Center as well, but I need to ask Shugen Roshi about that. So this is not a koan that we've encountered working at Prajna. Joshu's unsheathed sword, glittering severe frost is illuminating. Asking what it is, the body is cut in half. So Master Joshu was one of the most famous characters in our literature. We encounter him in many koans. This may be apocryphal, but the story goes that he became enlightened at the age of 80 and taught until the time of his death at 120 years old. I think probably that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but who knows? But the point is that whenever we encounter Joshu, he is kind of this wizened Yoda-like figure. He was very playful. We know that from his interactions with students. And so, Joshu's unsheathed sword, I think, is referring to the sword of prajna, or the sword of wisdom, which gives and takes life, it is said. How can you give and take life? Well, I can give life by dapping you up and telling you what a great Zen student you are, and what a great Dharma heir you are, and what a great sensei you are. Give life, give encouragement. You're struggling with a koan that you're making good progress with. It's not easy in early koans. You're not even here. You're off dealing with some issue. I can give you encouragement. I can give you life. I can give you hope. I can make you want to keep going in your Zen practice. It's part of my job as your teacher. What about taking life? Taking life doesn't mean literally that we're going to kill you. Taking life means trimming away all of the excess bullshit that's getting in your way from functioning optimally as a human being, as a fully realized human. Again, because I'm a nerd, I studied religious studies in college. I just find not just Zen, but religion in general fascinating. And I was reading about Scientology this morning because that's the kind of thing I do for fun because I'm a nerd. And I was reading about the operating thetan, or I don't know how they say it, but it's, from what I understand, it's someone who is able to move through the world quite unencumbered by all of their internal scripts and nonsense. And that to me sounded a lot like what we strive for in Christianity and being Christ-like, what we strive for in Buddhism of being enlightened. It's being free from our delusions and our hang-ups and our conditioning so that we can be more spontaneous, present, alive. So taking life in order to give life, if that makes sense.
So that's a tenet of Scientology.
I don't know that what I just said is a tenet of Scientology, but they have this idea of going clear, they call it, where you're moving through all of your, they call them engrams, and all of your imprinting and conditioning so that you can be more free and spontaneous. So, Joshu's unsheathed sword is referring to that sword of prajna wisdom that gives life and takes life, depending on the circumstances. Glittering severe frost is illuminating. That's a beautiful image. There's severe frost on the sword. It's so sharp and cold and precise that it illuminates. Asking what it is, the body is cut in half. So that could refer to a student trying to get into theories or philosophies. Well, my understanding of the prajna sword is blah, 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 right? You get a good whack if you talk that way. Not literally, but I don't know. You used to get a lot of whacks until you asked me to stop. Your teacher may try to get your attention if you get into a lot of theory. And that's what this is saying. The body is cut in half. Straight through. We're not going to mess around with theories and ideas and pontificating. We're going to be very immediate, direct, right here, right now. What is happening? So taken in whole, we could say this sword, this glittering, frosty sword If you ask what it is, you'll be cut in half. You're not supposed to understand what it is. You're just supposed to use it or have it used upon you. So then there's a testing question on this koan. So if you were to come to Dokusan, if you made it into 31 koans in, you would come to Dokusan and you would try to express this koan in some way that showed your understanding of it. But some of these koans have testing questions. So I might pass you on your answer, but then I would ask the testing question, which line is most important? Does anyone want to take a stab at which line is most important? Joshu's unsheathed sword, glittering, severe frost is illuminating, asking what it is, the body is cut in half.
I would offer the second sentence.
Glittering, severe frost is illuminating. How come?
Well, as you said, it's a really lovely and kind of poetic image, but it's also one that elicits a sense of deadly cold clarity.
Yes. Yes, deadly cold clarity. That's very good. Anyone else? How about for you? What's the most important line? Joshu's unsheathed sword, glittering, severe frost is illuminating, asking what it is, the body is cut in half.
I think for me, right now, asking what it is, the body is cut in half, because that hits home insofar as my natural inclination is to ask what it is.
Right. So those are two different lines. So which of those is most important? I think you're right. But depending on which one you say, you're either half right or all the way right. Don't think about it. Spontaneously.
Asking what it is.
Mm-hmm. One can make an argument that any of these four are the most important. And depending on your teacher, if you were really strong in your conviction with any of these four lines, they might pass you. Other teachers would be anal and insist that one line is correct and the other three are wrong. The good news is, it'll take you a maximum of 4 dokusans to get it right, because there's only 4 lines. The one that really jumps off the page for me, I really liked what you said. The one that jumps off the page for me, like with you, is asking what it is. However, as I was pondering this koan today, something occurred to me that I think is worth mentioning. Because the koan seems to indicate that asking what it is a bad thing, and it's sort of pejorative. Like if you ask what it is, you're going to get cut in half. Which is very typical. Zen lore is full of these rather melodramatic, blood and guts kind of imagery to try to warn you off of being overly intellectual. However, we also, as Zen students, know that it's important to ask what something is. It's important to not think we know what it is. It's important to be asking ourselves, what is this? Who am I? What is best in this situation? One of my favorite sayings in our whole canon is, not knowing is most intimate. The older I get, the more questions I have and the fewer answers I have. I don't know. And you start to, after a while, have this sort of lightness about you where you're kind of going, I'm not sure what to do here. Or I'm not sure that was the right thing to do. And then you move on. You try to get it right. You try to do the right thing, but life becomes less onerous because you're not convinced that there is a right or wrong thing to do. So you just do your best. So asking what it is important. What is this life? What is this practice? What is my marriage? What is my parenthood? What is my story? What is my purpose? These are important questions. It's not necessarily important to answer them, it's important to ask them. Because if you ask those questions, it creates space, it creates an opportunity for something new to happen, for something lively to happen, for you to experience life more fully. I really like this koan because I remember when I first encountered it with no context. I was like, what the hell does this mean? And if I remember correctly, it was a long time ago, but I seem to recall asking Shishin that, and he just kind of laughed and said, just sit with it. And then I think the next time I passed it. But it's a really lovely koan. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
What is the sword? What is the sword?
Like! Anyone else?
No,
See, I'm not going to answer you in concepts. That's the whole point. Smart guys like you want an intellectual answer. Spontaneous, in the moment, nonverbal. What is the sword? Hey! That's the sword. Do you understand? Good. Did you have something to say, Sensei?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, honestly. And what you're saying about not knowing is most intimate.
Yes.
It's one of those things where so often with koans, they, dare I say, improve with age like old scotch.
Yes.
You know, where you'll find one presentation that you make, and then years later, it comes back up in the context of some experience that you're having, and it's a completely different opportunity to understand it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why Maizumi Roshi used to say asa ni ko. I don't speak Japanese, but my understanding is that would translate as let us appreciate. Not let me appreciate that. Not you appreciate me. Let us appreciate. Because if you make this practice a lifelong practice, as you age, you do appreciate certain things in different ways. Koans, stories, experiences.
I would use the example of my wife's purring. At night, a long time ago, when we first were together, and I refer to it now as purring, and she would snore. It would drive me nuts. And now, when I lay next to her and she purrs, I'm like, I know she's right there.
Yes,
Uh,
that's
for
very
me,
sweet.
That's fine. I'm happy with her purring.
Well, and that's true. You've been married how long?
36 years with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those really long-term relationships, it's interesting how the things that used to irritate you become endearing. And, there's even things that my various teachers have said to me over the years that really bothered me at the time, or hurt me at the time, or frustrated me at the time, or I didn't understand it at the time, or whatever, that now I go, oh, I know what they were getting at. A really good example of that is that right before Shishin Roshi gave Shiho to now Shinko Roshi. He said he was going to put the iron yoke around her neck. I see. Yeah. So someone in the audience just went like that. It sounds odd, right?
Well, I don't know if it is.
Well, he was referring to the brown Rakasu.
Oh.
But, you know, when you yoke a cow or a bull, it's a way to, you know, get them to then pull the plow and do whatever you want them to do. The iron yoke.
Some people even see a yoke as a way to be controlled or control something.
Yeah. So at the time, well, he didn't mean it as that he was going to control her. He meant that...
People have their reactions, their responses of their own.
Right.
Well,
And he meant that once you become a sensei, you are yoked to the Dharma and you cannot get out. Although, of course, I know a number of people who received Shiho and disappeared. You know, it's kind of like when I used to teach more martial arts than I do now. You know, you'd get someone a black belt and you would tell them this is where the training really begins. And some people would stick around and they would really learn a lot after black belt, and other people would be like, thanks a lot, and then you wouldn't see them anymore. So anyway, my point is that I was at the time that he said that to me, I don't know, somewhere in my early 20s. And I remember thinking to myself, because I'm kind of a bon vivant and because I really love the Dharma and because I think that becoming a Zen teacher is a wonderful thing, and I think that people wanting to learn the Dharma is a wonderful thing. And I tend more toward the life-giving part of the sword than the life-taking part. I think life is hard enough. I'm more inclined to dap you up and encourage you than I am to criticize you. Right? That's what the kids say these days, right? Dap you up.
Sure, Josh.
I'm always reminded of the sword that's used in the ceremony of a knight ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a statement of authority and power and acceptance and approval, and that same sword can kill.
That is correct. Robert Bly, the poet and leader of the men's movement, you know, used to talk about how you should hang a sword on your wall. It's not a violent thing. It's a reminder of your own strength and a reminder that you could use it if you needed to. That actually makes you less likely to use it. Going back to the martial arts too. Knowing I can defend myself means I will likely not need to. But the point is that I was kind of going, why is he not excited and celebrating? I can't wait to give Dharma transmission to Shinko. This is wonderful. And I'm not being critical of him at all in saying this. Some of it is his personality. He's a little bit sarcastic and has a particular sense of humor. But I also understand now, having been a teacher for almost 10 years, that like, I really enjoy teaching the Dharma. And, you know, before coming over here, I was kind of chilling at home, but I knew that all of you were going to be here expecting me to come teach you, so I came. It's not a big burden or imposition, but I mean, it's a responsibility, and it's sometimes it's not convenient. So I now understand what he meant by that, is what I'm getting at. So you come to appreciate, there's probably things that I will say that you might not understand or appreciate now, and then at some future time, maybe you will. So. I did record this, so you'll be able to hear it all.
Okay, good.
Anyone else have any questions or want to say anything? All right. Well, keep asking what it is. Keep asking, keep questioning, keep not knowing.
That's the primary koan of some Korean Buddhism. That is the koan they give you is, what is this?
Mm-hmm. That's the only koan you really need. I think the 600 some odd koans in our canon, Daido Roshi used to talk about how it's like a diamond with 600 little points to it. And it's like, it's the same diamond. It's just looking at it from all the different angles so you can really fully appreciate it. And, what's the point of koans? You can get cute about it and just be like, there's no point. Or you can be like, the point of koans is to do koans. But if you're not being cute and you're actually just answering the question in a straightforward way, you would say, well, the point is to become more fluid and able to be appropriate in each moment and to be spontaneous in each moment. And if someone is crying before you, you will probably start to cry. And if they're laughing, you'll probably start to laugh. And if they need encouragement, you'll give it to them. And if they need to be told what they're doing is wrong, you'll do that. And it won't be about you. It's like Master Joshu himself. We're talking about Joshu this evening. Someone asked him, there's all these different ways of asking it. What's the meaning of Bodhidharma coming from the West? What's Buddha nature? What is mind? They're all basically the same question, which is, what's the point of all this? Why are we here? And one of his answers was, a ball touched on rushing water. And another time he was asked he said moment to moment, nonstop flow. And I really like the metaphor of a ball tossed on rushing water because the ball is just going wherever it's taken. And that's how we should be in our lives. We shouldn't be fighting the flow all the time.
It's funny, when you said that, the mental image that arose was like an iron ball that just sank and let water flow over it.
Well, that's interesting too, because sometimes there's a metaphor used for koans, which is to swallow the red hot iron ball. It's be hard on your esophagus. But the idea is that it's just in there and you're sitting with it and it's just cooking. It's cooking in your guts. And you're really feeling it. It's not about, I suppose the formula is probably to just sit meditation and he'll probably take that answer, or probably he wants me to go in there and say, how can I help? Because, there's certain stock answers in koans that are often correct. If you're really sitting with the red hot iron ball, there's none of that. There's none of that formulaic stuff going on. There's real spiritual struggle that leads to real spiritual breakthrough, that leads to a beautifully spontaneous presentation in Dokusan, and your teacher can just tell whether you got it or not. Daido, I once heard him say that too. He said, you can come into Dokusan and stand on one leg and jump around and cluck like a rooster, and if you've seen the koan, I'll know. I never had the courage to do that in Dokusan with him. He was very intimidating. But anyway.
I had a long period of terrible sleep habits, and I would get up in the middle of the night, and it would actually be the most beneficial time to sit with my koan.
Right.
Simply because I was in this liminal state and not able to be right there.
Mm.
Right.
Instead, presentations, understanding thereof, etc., would just come from a different place entirely.
Well, and everybody in this room I know fairly well, and everybody in this room is quite intelligent, which is generally useful in life, but it can also really get in our way. And one of the gifts of koans for me, to your point, is to get out of that intellectual space. And one of the reasons why you tend to do better with koans when sitting dawn zazen or evening zazen is because you're in that liminal space between sleep and awake, or during sesshin when you're just really deep in your practice. It just comes much more naturally than when you're rushing out to help someone that needs you and then rushing back in, or you're, trying to run your business, or your wife is annoyed with you, or your child did something you don't like, or whatever, and you're trying to get into that quiet space. Anyway, that's probably enough for now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, those of you that are watching, and we will talk more next week.